Cavanaghs of Charleville. Come on, get behind the wheel. Cavanaghs of Charleville. You won't find a better deal. Cavanaghs of Charleville. We got all the cars you need. Cavanaghs of Charleville. Satisfaction guaranteed. With quality that's hard to beat. We'll put you in the driving seat. Cavanaghs of Charleville. You won't find a better deal. Cavanaghs of Charleville.
Welcome back to the latest edition of Treaty Talk. Myself, Jack Neville, and Matt Callan of the Weekly Observer and Vale Star. I suppose it's a very, very special edition. It's All-Ireland final edition of Treaty Talk, and we're delighted to say that it's been sponsored by Cavanaghs of Charleville. A very kind word for them for sponsoring it. Matt, on the 11th of December, I look at my laptop screen here, we're looking forward to an All-Ireland hurling final, and as well as that, we have the minor hurlers, minor footballers, under 20 hurlers, all in action on the weekend of the 12th, 13th of December. I suppose, just to start with, we never thought this was going to come at the outset of 2020, but we're delighted to be here.
We're absolutely delighted, Jack, and what a weekend of games. Like, what a 26 or 28 hours, like from 1 o'clock on Saturday, when we have 3 games on Saturday, and of course all leading into 3:30 in Croke Park on Sunday, and the All-Ireland senior final. Like, it's an absolute bumper weekend. It's a fantastic weekend for Limerick GAA fans. Anyway, you know, I suppose All-Ireland weekend for hurling fans everywhere, I suppose, is one of those very, very, very special weekends, and I suppose it's extra special this year because of its uniqueness. That it's on the 13th of December, number one. It's a unique final in that it's a pairing that have never met in the final before, and it's unique in that it'll be a final that'll be played behind closed doors. I suppose in the fullness of time, when people will look back on it, it'll even become more unique. But look, I suppose the overriding consideration at this point, Jack, is that everybody is happy and relieved that we have a final. And it's full marks, Jack, to the GAA for the way that they have conducted it. And indeed, I suppose it should be said as well, like, full marks to the GAA for the way that they have tackled and handled the whole COVID thing. I don't think they've put a foot wrong. Like, when this outbreak came in March, the shutdown was called very, very, very quickly. But not only that, but the GAA were to the forefront as an organisation. Nowhere more so than in Limerick, which we can be very, very proud of. And full marks to the county board, Mike Reardon, and all those who were in the vanguard in leading the fight against COVID, in putting the structures there during the first lockdown and helping the most vulnerable people in our society. And like, it boded well for when there would be a championship. And I think the way that the GAA behaved in those early months of the pandemic, like, should have allayed fears that the GAA would not carry it off. Now, all right, there was an 11 weeks window left for the club games as a lead-in into the county action. Unfortunately, there were 1 or 2 mishaps along the way, but again, the GAA wasted very, very little time in acting on that when they ordered an end to the cessation of club activities again. But having been at the matches since it restarted, like the protocols that are in place, Jack, you know, it is so safe for everybody. There isn't a question about that, and it's in the open air, and where there is less likelihood of or possibility of transmission. Like, you know, full marks to the GAA. It's just absolutely fantastic that we have a championship. And of course, the icing on the cake is Limerick in the final.
Yeah, and I was listening to TJ Ryan the week, and he was just kind of saying the word he used was resilience, and it really speaks volumes to the players and managers that they could have packed it in and didn't have to do it, and it's so awkward for them just travelling to games on their own, and there's no fans to celebrate, and there's no one to drive them on in the games. They're only each other, so it's just brilliant for them.
Jack, you must hand it to the players. You must hand it to the players, because like when it came to adhering to protocols, and you've just touched on it there when you've said about travelling alone to games and all that sort of thing, they bought into it in full right from the start. And like the role models that we have seen Limerick have been for the last couple of years, like, you know, and it's not just Limerick. All other county players did the same. Full marks to the players. And like, tis only in as we probe and dig into it on the lead up to the final that we learn about the amount of effort that certain players, practically without exception, county players, put into it during the lockdown on their own, on the hope that there would be a championship. And, you know, thankfully for them that it has come to pass.
Yeah, and Declan Hannon spoke about that when his runs during the lockdown, that was the end goal in sight, and even though they didn't know it was going to happen, they still ploughed through, and it's credit to every player, not just the probably 40-45 players we'll see on Sunday, and I suppose the Joe McDonough players as well. It's not just them, it's everyone that we've seen in the championships here, and it's just been brilliant, and it helps you get through a weekend of lockdown when there's nowhere to go, that you have the GAA. But I suppose just looking at this All Ireland hurling.
Just on that point, what GAA has done in the last 6-8 weeks since the championship commenced, what it has done, even right back to July when the club championship started, what it has done for the mental well-being of the people. That they have, like, people are spoiled for choice. These weekends, there are so many games. Like this weekend alone, Limerick are playing 4 games, and it's possible to see all 4. You know, it's phenomenal. Like in the past, the possibility of seeing a first-round Munster minor football championship game between Limerick and Waterford would be very, very, very remote. Yeah, you could back up at the moon and get a better response, you know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely opened avenues and into streaming and etc. And it's something positive that we can take out of the year. But definitely one positive that we have to look forward to is this hurling final. And I suppose for the new Limerick generation of fans, this is kind of quickly becoming a norm to see Limerick in a final and a second in 3 years. But it's only Limerick's 6th final in the last 40 years. Like it's incredible what this team are doing. And then it's only Limerick's 18th overall. It's only Waterford's 8th overall. So it'll show you the magnitude of the game. Even though Limerick have been very successful in recent years, it's still a huge thing to get an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, it's a huge achievement. You're right. The 6th final since 1940, which for a strong hurling county like Limerick, like is a poor return actually in what 80 years. For Waterford, of course, it's only an 8th final, but and they're only seeking a 3rd title, and they haven't had great experiences in finals in a couple of them. They've had very poor luck. I remember in 1963, if you go back to 1963, when they played Kilkenny in the final and scored 6 goals and 8 points in the final and were beaten on a day when Eddie Kerr scored 14 points in Kilkenny. That's the type of luck they have. Then they came up against Kilkenny at their best, was it in 2008, and got wiped off the pitch, you know, now 3 years ago. And we seem to be forgetting this. Like we're saying, we're putting a lot of emphasis on Limerick being in a second final in 3 years. But Waterford are in a second final in 4 years. Now, what has happened with Waterford since? Like it's very, very hard to understand. Like, obviously, they didn't adapt to the no Munster format. Obviously, there was something that wasn't right. There was must have been going on behind the scenes. In that, they played 8 games in the Munster Championship, 7 defeats and 1 draw in 2 years, and suddenly here they're back in the 3rd year and they're in an All-Ireland final. Like, you see, and essentially there has been a bit of a turnover in the team in that I think it's 7 that played in 7 or 8 that played in 2017 are likely to start on Sunday. That's a 50% turnover, Jack.
Yeah, and it's a huge turnover, and it's huge credit to Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavens especially. And we'll get into the teams in a minute and the games that we've seen this year. But just a quick word on the build-up to the game. I suppose it's 2 years ago. I suppose it's probably 28 months this stage in 2018 when Limerick were in the All-Ireland final for the first time in 11 years, and the bunting and the flags and the buzz and everything around. And it's such a different build-up for players. And do you think it'll probably affect players in probably a better way, that they won't have that extended pressure, and especially when they get out there, they won't have the pressure, or it's worse that their achievements probably aren't being seen as clearly as they were in 18?
Yeah, I think could work to that advantage, because you remember back in 2018 and all the hype that was about it, and they literally they literally just couldn't get away from it. From the time they got up until they went to bed, and Declan Hannon actually touched on it on his interview, like when he said people are working from home, we're not interacting with as many people, and they're not being out and about as much other than going to training and coming back. I think the low key will. I think John Kiley and his management will welcome it. Because as we have seen, like you hear managers always on the lead up to an All-Ireland final played low key. Like, the climate is there for low key on this occasion, and it is a low key. And I suppose we're probably more conscious of it being low key in Limerick, maybe than others, in the fact that we have been that we are in a second final in 3 years, and we can contrast it very readily and very easily with the build-up that was there 2 years ago.
Yeah, and just touching again on that 2018, I suppose that you can't help but see the similarities between Limerick in 2018 and Waterford in 2020, kind of teams, traditional teams that kind of have been on the back foot for a few years coming into that year. Losing a run of 3 or 4 finals over the course of 50, 60 years. Like, it's hard not to compare the sides.
It is hard not to compare them. But Waterford's, I suppose Waterford's hurling tradition is probably, this is no disrespect, is probably not as deep-rooted as Limerick is. Like, they first showed signs of being a hurling power in the late 40s when they won the All-Ireland, when they won a double, actually, in 1948, senior and minor, but we had beaten them to that record when we had done it in 1940. But Limerick had a very deep-rooted tradition right from the start of the GAA, like through the 20s, and particularly through the 30s of the Mackey era. But Waterford's tradition is probably more recent, but like you would have to say that when you're talking about counties with a strong hurling tradition and ethos, Waterford are up there among them.
Yeah,
and their return in terms of silverware and is absolutely paltry. Like, you have a situation of they're going into an All-Ireland final on Sunday. There's only one player that has a senior inter-county medal. That is Kevin Morn, a Munster medal back in 2010. Very few counties have have gone into All Ireland finals with less decorations. Now, all right, there are a couple of players that have minor medals from 2013 and under 21 medals from 2016, but not a lot. They didn't seem to get as many out of successful under 21 teams as Limerick did. And yeah, there are similarities for Waterford going in this time to how and where Limerick went in 2018.
Yeah, and look, I suppose we'll get to the game itself. One thing that will definitely stand out just for Limerick, and it'll be cleared up tonight between 9 and 9:30, is just the Limerick team selection. How do you see John Kiley going about it? Do you think he'll stay with the tried and trusted that came with the win against Galway, or go back to the team that started against Waterford that obviously had Peter Casey? Obviously Seamus Flanagan then was in against Galway. Or could we see Rich English make his first appearance of the year? Or how do you see him going with it?
Anything is possible with John Kiley. I know we say this. I have a suspicion, rightly or wrongly, that changes, if any, will be at a minimal. It's the importance of an All-Ireland final. It's coming so soon after the semi-final. Limerick will have a few worries. They certainly will be worried about the type of start that they got against Galway, which was very, very poor, and which they were really on the hind foot, I suppose, for 15 minutes. I'm sure they will be addressing that, because you could see if Waterford got a similar start, that they could punish us more than Galway did in that period. And because Waterford have the ability to get goals, as we've seen now. Limerick have only scored 3 goals in the championship, and they were all in the one game against Tipperary. Like 3 of our 4 games, we have failed to raise a green flag, which I suppose is worrying in many ways. But we'll get back to it later. But Waterford, they have scored 6 goals, and they've got some very, very, very good goals. So that to me is something to worry about. And if you had a slow start similar to that, like what you had against Galway, I'd be worried that Waterford would run in a few goals, and that then you would have a mountain to climb. So I'm sure that we're going to see Limerick out of the blocks much quicker than we did in the semi-final. I think John Kiley will keep changes, if any, I'd say, to a minimum.
Yeah, and it's a testament to Kiley's team selection. Before the semi-final, there were still people murmuring for Kyle Hayes to go back to the forward line, and maybe Rich English to come in instead of Barry Nash or even Dan Morrissey. And look, Kiley could still go like that. But it's definitely a testament to the defence that there's way less chatter about that they've really proven themselves. And while Limerick aren't scoring goals, they are being very, very solid back there. And I've only conceded the goal to Clare and then the 2 against Tipperary.
That's it. They've only conceded 3 as well. And the defence has been rock solid. We can see in their last 2 games they haven't conceded a goal. Like, we cannot underestimate for 1 minute the enormity of the task facing John Kiley, Paul Kennock and their backroom team. When they set out in this campaign, having to replace 2/3 of a tried and trusted full back line. Richie English wasn't fully recovered from his cruciate. Mikey Casey had picked up a cruciate. Like, it was an enormous task to do, because you had such a regular full back line. You had such a competent full back line, that here you were, suddenly you were going to be shown 2/3 of it. And Dan Morrissey, of course, had a bit of experience playing full back, but not a lot. But like, he has grown into the position unbelievably during the campaign. Now, I felt, and we discussed it here prior to the Clare game, that we would see Barry Nash going back into the corner, and it says an awful lot for Barry Nash. The way that he made the transition in the first place from attack to defence. So, like, the step back probably wasn't as great as it seemed here was a lad now that was playing left half forward and maybe corner forward, and we were asking him to play cornerback. You know, it was a huge turnaround. But the type of form that Ballynash had shown during the Munster League and during the league campaign at wingback was just simply phenomenal. Like he just was on fire. And like after a few shaky moments in the early minutes against Clare, which you would expect, he's grown into the position. So, you know, and Richie English is now fit. Aaron Costello is fit. So, look, suddenly John Kiley has options there again.
Yeah, he definitely has options, but you'd have to probably predict that it's going to be the tried and trusted, and you'd be very confident in that tried and trusted if it is to be the one, with just how they've played so far this year. And just while they're on team selection, I suppose Waterford is probably more set in stone. The 15 that lined out against Kilkenny, you'd imagine will start, but Shane Fives is back. Do you see him pushing McNulty or Ian Kenna back out, or?
I think that's a strong possibility that you will see Shane Fives possibly instead of Ian Kenny. I don't know. It's a strong possibility. Shane Fives brings that little bit of extra experience over Ian Kenny. Ian Kenny has done quite well in there in the games in which he has been thrust into it. But I think that Liam Cahill will probably be he will probably be leaning for Shane Fives, if for no other reason than to bring that vital bit of experience, that little ingredient to a full back line, which in many ways, Jack, is a rookie full back line at this level. Like Ian Kenny, Shane McNulty, and even Conor Prunty, who is the team captain. Like they have little experience in the full back line at inter-county level. So Shane Fives, who had been a never present at right corner back, I think the temptation will be to bring him back, because even if you reflect on Limerick, having to bring in two people into the full back line, we got a certain amount of solace in the fact that we had somebody of the caliber and experience of Sean Finn to guide him through. So I think Liam Cahill will be looking and saying to himself, right, this is a young, inexperienced full back line. I have an opportunity there to put in a player of a very good caliber, Shane Fives, and add that vital ingredients of experience and experience on All-Ireland final day as well.
Yeah, he definitely does have that in it. And it's something I want to touch on more, just the strengths of both teams, and we'll probably do it individually in a minute. But one thing that they both definitely have in common is that versatility. And I suppose at Limerick, it's the likes of Kyle Hayes can play wing-back, centre-forward, Cian Lynch in the forwards, midfield. You have the likes of Rich English on the bench, whether it be Casey, Flanagan, Gallan, Mulcahy, you have them options up front. For Waterford, then you have Austin Gleeson and Stephen Bennett seem to have really found their niche in swapping between full forward and wing forward, and Jake Dillon and Kieran Bennett the same way. So the versatility is definitely one strength that both teams possess coming into the game. It is.
And you mentioned it there. And but I suppose, if we're looking for what's different for Waterford 2019, 2018, and what's happening in 2020. First of all, Liam Cahill has come in, and he has brought that winning mentality to the team, and obviously Cahill has a very, very good CV, Jack. 2018, Tipperary went down to Cork in the Munster under-21 final and got thumped down there. They got back through the losers group, or the provincial finalists going forward, and reversed it in the All-Ireland final. Liam Cahill led Tipperary to another Munster and All-Ireland under-20 last year. So I think the big difference, and you talk about the versatility of Austin Gleeson, like Austin Gleeson, by Austin Gleeson standards, is after a few very poor seasons, where he has made the impact he has made has been very, very little. You must remember that this man is somebody that was a double player of the year in 2016, was it?
Yeah.
You know, and you don't become a bad player overnight, but it looked for a long time as if that was the kiss of death in him. But you're right, himself and Stephen Bennett have this arrangement of alternating in and out, and of course then you have what Desi Hutchinson brings to a forward line. Like, is a serious forward line. But when you come to adaptability, and when you talk about players, the adaptability of players, and when you talk about plans to negate the impact of, for instance, the Limerick full forward line, which Galway did pretty well, or the Limerick half forward line, you know, put the shackles on them. You know, no opposition has yet come up with a plan to negate the influence of Cian Lynch. And like, he's such a huge presence, and his adaptability is a huge factor for Limerick. And the same goes for Kyle Hayes. Kyle Hayes is becoming one of those players. But I suppose if you look at the Limerick team, suppose the Limerick team is the same as it was against Galway, and you talk about adaptability. You look, Cian Lynch, midfielder, goes to centre forward. Look at Kyle Hayes, centre forward, goes back, wing back. Look at Barry Nash, corner forward, wing forward, goes back, wing back, goes back, corner back. Look at Dan Morrissey, out and out half back, goes back, full back. You see, all over the place, Limerick have it. But that is probably, you're right, that is probably part of the difference in Waterford this year, in that they have these players that have that adaptability, and that they can change around and make a difference. But I think the main thing is, the main change in Waterford, if you ask me to put my finger on what I think is the main change in Waterford, vis-a-vis Waterford of 2018 and 2019, and I simply sum it up by saying that Cahan, he's got Tadhg de Búrca back. He's playing at his very, very best. And he has now overseen Jamie Byrne and Austin Gleeson, and to a lesser extent, Stephen Bennett, recapture the potential that we all know they have.
Yeah, and if you're looking at those strengths of Limerick and Waterford, you picked out two players in particular, Cian Lynch and Tadhg de Búrca. If Cian Lynch is start at 11, Tadhg de Búrca will start at number 6. There's no doubt about that. Is that the key battle on the pitch on Sunday?
Well, it would be the big battle, and it would be the key battle.
And how would you see that playing out?
It would be the key battle, but when you say it would be the key battle, how do you stop? What does Tadhg de Búrca do when Cian Lynch starts rambling into midfield and starts influencing the game from there? It could certainly upset the Waterford defence.
Yeah, and you're saying that now, and I heard people during the week talk about key battles, and I think it was Ollie Moran last night said that Markin has gone out of the game and he'd love to be a defender now because your man could pick off 4 or 5 points and you could still be man of the match. But I suppose, in a broader terms, that middle third, we'll say, from Limerick's half-back line midfield, half-forward line, compared to Waterford's, that's where most of the big guns are. That will be the winning or losing of the game, you would imagine.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would agree with you. But of course, we have a very, very potent full forward line. Whatever the makeup of it will be, like Gillan, Mulcahy, Flanagan, or Casey, like, you know, there's adaptability there, and but of course the trick will be to get a supply of the ball into him, which will be hugely important, and hopefully that Aaron Gillan will be fully fit, which is another question. Like I think the omens in that regard are good, you know, and you know I'd also like to see that David Dempsey would also be on the bench, Jack.
Yeah, it sounds good from Galan and Dempsey's point of view, but I suppose we'll have to wait till this evening. But speaking again there, that half forward line of Limerick, we'll say Hegarty, Morrissey, whether it be Lynch, Reedy or Kyle that first game, has been a real strong point for Limerick. They got 12 points first against Clare, got 12 against Galway. Waterford seemed to be the kind of negated them in the Munster final. And then it was up to the likes of Mulcahy, Casey, Galan, who started against Waterford in Munster final, and Flanagan and Breen came on then. Is that the way you see this game going as well, that if they cancel each other out in the middle third, it'll be down to the full forward lines to get this going?
Possibly, and that's the point I was just made a while ago, I think it might very well come down to that. That's a very, very strong Waterford half-back line. Callum Lyons, Ty de Burke and Kevin Moran, and Kevin Moran is a more natural fit at half-back now. I know he's played a lot of holding at wing forward, but he seems to be far more comfortable, and since Steve Cahill moved him back to wing back, he has really reinvented himself and has been a crucial part in the Waterford story. Yeah, I think that's going to be crucial, and Limerick will be expecting in such circumstances that it will be the full forward line that will step up to the plate. But I have no doubt whatsoever, that if you take the two semi-finals, Jack, in isolation, you'd have to say that Waterford were favourites. But the way they played in the second half against Kilkenny. The downside of that, of course, is that the cat is out of the bag. I suppose we left Thurles after the Munster final not knowing exactly the optimum that Waterford could reach. Now I think in the second half against Kilkenny we know it. And I think there are few better in the game, as they have proved, than the likes of John Kiley and Paul Kinnock to prepare to counteract that. So, I think Limerick will have all those possibilities well catered for in the team plan and in the match plan.
And if we're still to focus on the respective full forward lines, there was obviously no goals in the Munster final, and you said Waterford have outscored Limerick 6-3 in that regard over the course of the year. Do you think to win on Sunday, the team will need to score goals, or do you think points could do it again like it did in Munster?
It may do it. It may. Points may do it again. But I think that in an All-Ireland final, there have been very few finals that a team that hasn't scored a goal have won. But I think, from a Limerick point of view and from a goal drought point of view, they didn't really create any clear-cut goal chances against Waterford in the Munster final. But they certainly created a couple of very good ones against Galway. And were very, very unlucky that they didn't get a couple of goals in normal circumstances. So, I have no doubt Limerick will be very, very conscious of that, the lack of goals in 3 of the 4 games. And, I would be slightly worried. I'd certainly be a bit more worried going in against Waterford. Hadn't we created those opportunities in against Galway? If you keep creating the opportunities, eventually they're going to start going in,
Yeah, I suppose we're not finished talking about this Sunday's game, and we probably won't be for a while yet, but just talking about goals there and goals against Waterford, the last time these sides met in a competitive game in the All-Ireland series outside of Munster was 2007, that epic All-Ireland semi-final. 5-11 to 2-15 is what I recall the scoreline was. Andrew Shaughnessy got a bag of goals, or 2 goals. Donny Ryan got 2, and Brian Begley. That's a kind of a game that's completely opposite to this game, where Limerick had lost the Munster final to Waterford, came to Croke Park, got the goals and got the win. So could that be something that Waterford are looking at as motivation going into this game to try and emulate what Limerick did 13 years ago?
Certainly they could, and they'll be saying to themselves, if Limerick can do it, turn over a bigger deficit, because they were well beaten in the Munster final, you will recall. Limerick were beaten, let me think, 3-17 to 1-14, was it?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, in the Munster final, beaten 3 goals on a day in which Dan the Man scored the 3 goals. He scored 3-3, like he had an unbelievable day that day. They certainly, and I have no doubt Liam Cahill will have put it up in front of him, lads. This can be done. You only lost the Munster final by 4 points. They lost the Munster final back in 2007 by 9 points and turned it around and won the All-Ireland semi-final by 5 points. No reason why you can't do it. It certainly is a motivating tool, no doubt whatsoever about it, Jack.
Yeah, and again, looking back on previous games, and we spoke about last week as well, the minor finals, Munster finals, 2013, 2014, both went to replays, both went Limerick's way, but Waterford got the win in the All-Ireland in 2013. Limerick won 21 titles in 15 and 17, and Waterford won the 16th title. So while Limerick have probably been more consistent over the last 3 years, these teams have been coming for a long, long time. They have.
And I suppose if there is a difference in Waterford going into this All-Ireland final and previous All-Ireland finals, you have a certain number of players that know what it's like to play in an All-Ireland final, be it minor or under 21, and they know what it's like to win an All-Ireland at minor and under 21. So, like, in that respect, I suppose it cancels itself out. Other than, I suppose, more Limerick players have certainly won under 21 medals than Waterford, and but no Limerick player has a minor medal. There are 3 or 4 of the Waterford team that have minor medals. So, there are many parallels in the lead up to this final. We'll say over the last 7 or 8 years. If you go back to 2013, as you rightly pointed out, 2014, both in Munster finals, both went to replays. There are parallels, like Waterford. Like whatever happened in 2018 and 2019, it looked as if there was a golden generation of Waterford players had been lost. But it has all been reincarnated, as it were, this year. Under Liam Cahill, and there's no doubt whatsoever Waterford are an important force.
Yeah, and just on the consistency and the golden generations, when you look at the Limerick 2018 starting 15 and just going off the Galway game, if that is, or even the Waterford game, there's only going to be 2 to 3 changes maximum. We're expecting Barry Nash and William O'Donoghue will be the changes for Mike Casey and Rich English, and then kind of either Flanagan or Casey probably, or Galan could be out. It's incredible consistency from the Limerick players to keep such a high standard when there's so many quality players in that Limerick setup.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, and a lot of it is about attitude, and you spoke about it earlier about being role models and what have you. It's about attitude. And it was something that I detected immediately after the All-Ireland final in 2018. First of all, and I've said this a number of times, after winning an All-Ireland, after a lapse of 45 years, players could have been excused for letting their guard down, getting carried away on the whole euphoria of what they had achieved. Without exception, Jack, they were back the Friday week following that, back with their clubs and standing out with their clubs. They were key players right through that campaign for their clubs, which to me spoke volumes for the type of characters and the type of players that we have in the squad. And they seem to me, and you will hear them when they're interviewed, meeting them casually, like there seems to be an insatiable hunger for more success, which and this has been borne out by the results. It's been borne out by the results since 2018. Like, you know, two Munster championships, two leagues, going for a second All Ireland in 3 years. Like, actions speak louder than words. It says it all, Jack.
Yeah, and you talk about the desire, and Tom Morrissey really sticks out for me. I remember in the wake of the 2018 All Ireland final, I was in the hill, I was crying, I was with the lads. It was just euphoria. And Tom Morrissey, the same age as me, had scored a goal in the All Ireland final, and he was cool as a breeze in his interview with, I don't know who interviewed him from RT, but he was cool, he was calm, collected. He said they had it in him. He was asked during the week about legacy, and he said that's for when he's retiring. So they really are focused, and it shows why they've won so much, essentially.
It does. They're grounded. And when he was asked the question, I was at the Zoom call, and like, he just didn't want to hear about it. It was what the legacy of this team would be, like he said, and rightly so. Like, Tom Morrissey's in the middle of a stellar career at the moment, and you know, why should he be reflecting on the legacy now? Because as it was quite clearly came through from his answer, it was almost, you haven't seen anything yet. That type of attitude, which is absolutely fantastic, Jack.
Yeah, it is, and two more.
Tom Morrissey, don't forget, like, Tom Morrissey was after coming off a man of the match performance, a performance for the Ages in the All Ireland semi-final, and you know, the couple of scores he got at the end to seal the deal camouflages the importance of the scores that he got in the early stages of the game when we were unable to find scores. Tom found them, you know. And if you look back at Tom Morrissey's history of his contribution to the team and where he has found scores at crucial stages, like, I wasn't surprised at Tom Morrissey's answer and Tom Morrissey's attitude. You know, talking about legacy at this stage, I think Tom wants to see the legacy in the fullness of time, and he's convinced. As I said, we haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah, and hopefully he'll be right. But two more men that are kind of building their own legacy, and I know we've talked about All Ireland for a while, and we will branch into the underage games just after this question. But one more about two men, John Kiely and Liam Cahill. Obviously, Kiely has that 21s from 2015, and obviously he's 2 Munster titles, 2 league titles, and All Ireland. And then you have Liam Cahill on the other side, then, he'll be, I don't know if I'm reading this, if I read this right, he'll be only the third ever manager to win a minor under 21 and senior, alongside Mickey Hart and Jack O'Shea. So Jack O'Connor, sorry. They're two managers that just have huge experience and huge pedigree.
Yeah. Two excellent managers, and by the way, I hope that that Liam Cahill will not join that illustrious list on Sunday. That there'll still be only two. Yeah, but look, the impact of John Kiely has been absolutely phenomenal. It has been Midas-like, but in fairness, John Kiely's knowledge of the game is absolutely phenomenal, and his ability as an individual to manage people, and you know, it's simply phenomenal. I have to say, and you've probably gleaned from my remarks over the last couple of years, I am simply in awe of John Kiely. I just think he's one in a million, absolutely one for the ages. Like, in his career as principal of Abbey's school in Tipperary, as an individual, his ability to bring people with him, you know, it shines out in all this. And he's the sort of guy that's you know, if there's a deficit in anything, he's not afraid to say, you know, I put my hands up, I need strengthening there. And I'm talking about the backroom team that he has built, with the like of Paul Kinnock, top class coach, Caroline Curran, Shawnee O'Donnell, top class man in stats. John Kiley wants the best, and he wants the best to make it happen. And I think we all see the team he's built on the field. He's built an extraordinary backroom team as well, and that has to be said. But John Kiley is a leader of men, and this success, like, he must stand up and take an awful lot of the credit for it. Now, he's damn good at deflecting the credit. You know, in fairness, he is very, very generous and liberal in doling out the credit. But John Kiley and, you know, his backroom team, and John Kiley in particular as a man, like, he's the glue that brings the whole thing together.
Yeah, and definitely, and it's important that you mentioned the backroom team there, the likes of Paul Kinnerk, whose work kind of goes unnoticed a lot of the time, and Donald O'Grady is involved, and I know there's a few more strength and conditioning coaches, etc. And Mikey Beavens then for Waterford, they're probably not to the forefront, but their work is definitely seen on the field, and it's good to acknowledge those people behind the scenes as well.
Oh, absolutely. Like Paul Kinnerk's record speaks for itself. It's absolutely just a phenomenal coach and a phenomenal game strategist. You know, and that's why I said that the second half that Waterford put on against Kilkenny, you know, the cat may be out of the bag to a certain degree in that one. Waterford are built along much the same lines, and excellent coach there, and you have former player Stephen Frampton. Now it looks in Waterford as it's a much tighter backroom team, and so be it. But certainly it goes unnoticed by most fans, the contribution that these people may make. But it must be acknowledged, because, like, the sacrifices that players and these people make the same sacrifices for the gratification of the thousands of Limerick supporters and Hurling supporters around the country, like, is just simply phenomenal. It's totally unselfish, totally, and they should be recognised.
Yeah, it's definitely unselfish, and look, it's important to recognise them. We'll come away from the All Ireland for a minute, Matt. We'll come back to that towards the end. There's obviously 3 other games we mentioned at the start.
We're going to come back for the prediction, I presume, guys.
Exactly. There, you weren't getting out of this week, especially not the All Ireland final. But I suppose we'll venture.
Football always breaks out, you Jack.
We'll venture into the football for a minute, Matt. And obviously, the minor footballers, Joe Lee's minor footballers, play Waterford at 1:00 this Saturday in the Gaelic grounds. It's going to be streamed live by Stream Sport, by Raphael's company, so that'll be available for anyone to watch. And you mentioned at the start, to be able to watch a minor quarter-final is brilliant. But Joe Lee's side, I was talking to him during the week, and he's talking about building for the future. And Limerick football has been on a high for 2020, so it'll be excellent for them to continue in that vein against Waterford and move into a semi-final where they'll avoid Cork and Kerry if they move on. It'll be either Clare or Tip.
Yeah, and it certainly will. It certainly will, and I think we have a long way to go back since we were in a Munster final, and I think it was actually 98. But you know, they'll have to take leadership, you know, or take inspiration, should I say, from what the senior team achieved. And when you see the senior team, how close they were to Tipperary, and what Tipperary subsequently went on to achieve. Now, I'm discounting last Sunday's performance by Tipperary, because if you look back in the game, like for a losing team, they racked up a huge score. And if you saw the 2 gilt-edged chances they got of goals before Mayo got their first goal, had any one on the 2 of those gone in, you could have had a totally different story. But what I'm saying is to put into context where Limerick football is at and how far it has come along. And obviously Joe Lee, he's a Lee, brother of Billy, of course. So, like, the plan will be much the same. Like, I saw Limerick. Joe was manager last year. I saw Limerick. I thought they put in a decent effort last year. They were beaten by Clare in the first round. They drew away to Waterford and drew with Tipperary, but it wasn't enough to get them into the playoff final. Now it's a straight knockout this year, and I think it's a completely new squad actually. In that I think there was only one player that played last year that's actually on the squad. That's not last year, and about four in total. Very, very hard to judge. Very, very hard to judge minor games going into a first round. Harder still this year because this game was originally due to have been in April, and you know that there have been so many false starts with this. Now, all right, April. Then it was supposed to have been on over a month ago when the championships were restarted there, and there was a couple of games played in the minor hurling and in the under-20 hurling championship. That game was scheduled, and lo and behold, it fell foul of the second lockdown. And so it has been stop-start, and it hasn't been a very easy year for anybody. For Billy Lee or for Joe Lee and his management team, and he has a similar strong management team of football people around him. The Lavin brothers from Adair and Paddy McCarthy, St. Kieran's, John O'Grady, Martin O'Sullivan from Newcastle West, all good football men, and Angela Hogan is involved in there as well. And look, we just hope for the best. We just don't know what will come from Waterford. Just as we just don't know. There is no barometer for judging, you know, where Limerick are at. But there is one thing that we can be absolutely assured. With Jolie and the backroom team he has, that no stone will be left unturned in ensuring that they're in the best possible place going out on Saturday.
Yeah, and you'd have to agree with that, and you'd have to say that these minor games are very hard to judge, and you'd see so little of these players prior to these games. But these are the games where they make the names for themselves, and hopefully we'll see them in development squads for Limerick for the years to come, which has definitely proven worthy, as seen with the seniors. The other minor.
At the end of the day, here, Jack, there is a clear path to a Munster final. There is a clear path to a Munster final with the big guns off the pitch, and we have shown in recent years, Jack, that we can match Tipperary and Waterford at underage football. Now, Clare have proved to be a bit of an obstacle to us, a bit of a bogey team to us at underage football in recent years, particularly at minor football. But look, for now, the focus and the emphasis is on Waterford and getting over Waterford. And let's hope that they'll set up a Munster semi-final on Saturday.
Yeah, and going on to the other minor team, the minor hurlers, managed by Darren Mullins in his second year as manager. They play Cork in Simple Stadium at 1 o'clock on Saturday. It's clashing with the footballers. That's available on the Sport TG-Car YouTube page. In our preview on the website, the link to that is in there for anyone to watch. And Limerick come in as Munster champions. They obviously come in Munster champions after the round robin last year. And I was talking to Dermot, and he was saying that the round robin suited them, but they're back to straight knockout. And they play a Cork team that always brings strong underage squads. So what are you expecting for this game?
I really don't know what to expect. I really don't know what to expect because, again, it has been stop-start. Now, one thing we know is that Cork have a decent team. They've had a big win over Clare in the first round. And like it, you know, that will not count for as much as it would count for in normal circumstances because we've had a lockdown since. There has been very, very little between these teams. Like if you go back to 2018, Limerick had a good win below on Cork in the first round that year. Last year, it was a draw in Limerick. Cork snatched the draw at the end. But I tend to look back further to 2017 when we had that under-17 competition for 1 year. And we saw Cork, they came to Limerick and they beat Limerick 16.6 in the Gaelic grounds. But you know, so look, these games, Jack, they're impossible to call really, because we haven't seen Limerick. Now we know that Cork have a decent side. Look, I think this one is all to play for. You know, I think we're in there with a right chance. At the start of the Munster Championship last year, very few would have said that Limerick would have come out at the end as champions. You know, but they did. Now, they have 6 or 7 players that were on that team. Now, that team did, in fairness, have some exceptional players. When you look at the like of Cathal O'Neill, and when you look at the like of Colin Coughlin, you know, and Aidan O'Connor, but there are still very, very, very good players on this current minor team, like of Adam English, who's the captain. Ronan Lyons was absolutely outstanding in the minor championship last year. You Patrick O'Donovan, you know, absolutely terrific, terrific forward. You know, you've that little Liam Lynch and Mungret. You've that little bit of a carryover of vital experience. But Cork will be strong. I think it's going to be difficult for Limerick, if I'm honest. But I'd be hopeful.
Yeah, and look, I won't ask you to make predictions on them 2 minor games. I'm just going to assume that you'll be like me and we'll go for a Limerick win, and hopefully it's just a chance for those Limerick players to represent Limerick and that they can move on up in the grades. You were kind of alluding to the under-20 game there halfway through. It is very easy to get confused with these games. The under-20s are playing Cork as well in the Gaelic grounds. That game throws in at 4:30. It'll be live on TG Cahir on the television station. The minor one is obviously on the YouTube channel. You've seen these sides in recent years. They obviously played in the 20s last year. Cork won 20-16. You were saying that Cork under-17 side won the All-Ireland this grade 3 years ago. It'll be very tough for Paul Beery and his side. But one thing Limerick have is 4 lads that have been training with John Kiley's team throughout the year. They'll obviously bring that bit of experience. And then you throw in the likes of Cathal O'Neill and Colin Coughlin and Aidan Connor you mentioned there earlier. And Limerick have a very impressive squad. So while Cork are favourites, can you see the upset for Limerick?
Yeah, I think there's a strong possibility. Paul Beery has assembled a very, very strong backroom team with him. I see Limerick are in here with a right chance. Now Cork have played a game. I've seen the game, and like long periods in that game, Kerry really put it up to him. It ended 224 to 210. Like it was a useful Kerry team, and by extension, of course, it was a useful game for Cork to get. Like I did say there about the 2017, Cork won the Munster and all, the 1 year that the under-17 was on, and which would feed into the under-20 now. But having looked back and compared the teams, there has been quite a change in the teams. And under-20 and previously under-21, when you're comparing it to minor of 3 years previously, it's an inexact science, Jack, because so many things can happen. Like if we were to go back to 2012, before we had the good years in 2013 and 2014 in minor, who would have said that we would have won the 2015 All-Ireland? But we did, and it comes down again, I suppose, to John Kiley and his management team and the manner in which they organised it and tapped all the resources that were there. Some very young players and some very exciting players. Under 20, formerly under 21, I find it hard to accept that he's under 20. It's very, very, very hard to judge. And you're right. Then we have a strong panel. The only one I could find in the Cork panel that has any bit of senior experience was Shane Barrett, who made a cameo appearance, was it against Tipperary, I think, late in the game, or has had very little experience. Now we have on the Limerick side, you have Jason Gillan and you have Josh Considine from Patrick's Well, you have Mark Quinlan from Garris Billan, and you have Brian O'Grady from Kilkeely Drumkeen, all of whom been in with the Limerick senior panel, and have made appearances with the Limerick senior team. Like Brian O'Grady has, before the lockdown, has come off the bench a couple of times. Josh Considine has started, and Jason Gillan and Mark Quinlan. So that's experience. And then you have coming through, as you say, from the other side, you have the like of Mark Cahill O'Neill and Aidan O'Connor and Colin Coughlin, young exciting players. I think this game is up for grabs, Jack. I really think that Limerick are in with a shout in this one, a real good shout. Now, yeah, Cork will start favourites. Yes, they will start favourites. But I think Limerick have a right good chance in this one.
Yeah, I saw Cork in that game, the 224-210 win over Kerry, and wasn't overly impressed. There was some quite good players. Brian O'Sullivan from Canturk midfield was quite good, and Colin O'Brien, if I'm right, played for Mary Iron, if it's given Cup recently. But they do have strong players. But from our own club game, seeing these Limerick players, I'd really fancy Limerick. And if I had to put you on the spot, I will for this one, the under-20s, because we've seen these players play. Can Limerick get that upset win and get into a Munster under-20 final?
I think they can, Jack.
And hopefully that'll be 3 from 3 on Saturday to set up for Sunday.
Oh no, I didn't say that. No. No, I honestly don't know how the minors will go. If I'm honest, I haven't a clue how the minor football will go. As for the minor hurling, you'd have to say a slight advantage Cork.
Yeah, and look, that we just have to wait and see for those games. But as I said, they're all available to watch, which is brilliant, because I think one parent gets in for the minor game. But look, you'd have families and friends, especially at the kind of minor under 20 grades, that are really keen to see their whatever family members or friends to represent their county. So they're all being shown. They're all on Saturday. The 2 minor games are at 1 o'clock. The under 20 game is on 4:30. So a nice handy day in front of the fire for whoever's there. If you're lucky enough to get in, you're lucky enough to get in. But the big one, obviously,
it's great that they're being shown, and it's a pity maybe that the parents don't get in. Both parents don't get in, or a few family members, because for many, particularly at underage level, Jack, it might be the only day they'll represent their county. And it's a special day and a special memory. At least they will have an opportunity of recording it and reliving it.
Yeah, exactly. And just while we're venturing back into the senior game, while we're on people going to the games, obviously it's a huge disappointment that the family members of the senior squad won't be able to go. But there is a bit of light that all of John Kiley's extended squad will be able to go. And it's only right at the end of the day. John Kiley first called it. I don't know if he did it against Clare, but definitely against Tipperary, and has maintained that stance. The whole team, whole squad should be there. And those that have put in the effort for what has been a very long 2020 are getting their just rewards. And whoever John Kiley picks on the 26th, he's safe in the knowledge that the rest of the squad will be in Croke Park on Sunday. Yeah,
that is fantastic. And you're right. It was John Kiley that championed it from the start. And certainly was the catalyst for change in that decision. There's no doubt about that. The emphatic way in which he was about it, and other managers obviously followed suit afterwards. So, John Kiley's call suddenly became a clamour, and authorities, the government and the GAA relented, and they relented to do what was right, Jack. What was right, because I have been in Thurles. I have been in Thurles twice. I've been in Park Cleeve, and I have been in Croke Park. And you might say to me, you're the privileged, or you're one of the lucky ones. I would dispute that. All the protocols that are in place, they certainly are very, very, very safe places on match day. But you know, they are sad places in many ways when you think of so many people that love the wonderful, wonderful game of hurling that is ours, and they just cannot be there. And you look at all the facilities that are there, shops in the ground closed, rows and rows and tiers of seats unoccupied. Went down by the Croke Park Hotel, as we always do on match day in Croke Park. Last Sunday we took a photograph of it and put it up on social media. Absolutely deserted. You could fire a shot out of a gun and hit no one, or risk hitting nobody, actually. Totally deserted. And an All-Ireland semi-final happening over the water. You know, that sort of puts it into context. Probably one of the lucky ones to get in to see the hurling, certainly. But like the absence and the lack of occasion. Very, very hard to comprehend, Jack. Very, very hard to understand. Very, very hard to come to terms with.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that's hard to come to terms with. But hopefully, we won't dwell on it for too long, because that's just the way the world
the news
is
today, Jack, you know, that with regard to the vaccine, like is something that we must all welcome. With the Pfizer vaccine getting approval in America now, and Professor Luke O'Neill on this morning, like that, you know, hoping that by the end of February we may have up to 1 million people in this country vaccinated, and like at this stage, like I think the appeal should go out to people to stick with the guidelines, stick with them. The end is in sight. Like another 10 weeks, and we could be out of all this. Like if we win the Munster, if we win the All Ireland on Sunday, please don't go mad. Please don't go mad. Because look, there's another big prize down the road, and it's the suppression of this virus.
Yeah, and look, we're glad to get a bit of good news towards the virus and the vaccine. But just on 2020 as a whole, and look, we'll obviously be reflecting on the game next week, regardless of how it goes. But hopefully 2020 will be a year we can look back and we'll have some iconic images. Whoever lifts the trophy on Sunday, whether it's Declan Hannon or Conor Prunty, or for Kerry and Antrim, the Joe McDonough, an empty stand will become an iconic image in the time to come when we have the full stands. And if we're to take anything from 2020, it can be that we missed it so much. It shows the value of the GAA, how much we appreciate it. We'll look forward to games more, and we'll be back stronger than ever. But I am going to come to you from that final prediction, Matt.
I need to add to that, like what 2020 has done, Jack, has reinforced the position of the GAA in Irish life in every community across this country. The way the GAA mobilised in response to the pandemic is so admirable. Like the fantastic response of GAA clubs up and down the country was just absolutely phenomenal. The way the GAA went about running their competitions, the protocols that they put in place, the safety measures that they put in place, and not only put them in place, Jack, but insisted that they were implemented. You know, without making life difficult for those of us that were covering matches and on all that sort of a thing. I think 2020, irrespective of what will happen on Sunday, and I be hopeful, and I'm going to preempt you now that Limerick are going to win on Sunday, and you know that the GAA will have repositioned its place of importance in Irish life, which is terrible important.
Yeah, and I'll second you on that. And you got in there before I was able to ask you about your prediction, but you've gone for Limerick. Your colours nailed to the mast. I'm not surprised. But while I usually ask for a one-word answer, just a team, maybe a reason for All Ireland final day. What's the difference between Limerick and Waterford, and where will the difference be on Sunday?
I think Limerick have the ability, if the game is tight in particular, they have the ability to close out tight games and close them out with a certain amount of comfort and ease. We saw that in the Munster final. We saw it in the All-Ireland semi-final. They weren't really tested in that regard by Clare or Tipperary. Maybe they were against Tipperary in that they had to face a very strong breeze in the second half. But they have the resilience, they have the mental strength to see out these type of games. And I suppose above all, they have the wherewithal in terms of hurling ability, suite of skills, whatever you have, and above all, mental strength and delivering on the big day.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you there. When you said composure down the stretch, it's such a far cry from 2018. I will be happily glad to witness a game on Sunday where Limerick pull away towards the end and have it easier than 18. But one way or another, that's all we want is a Limerick win, and please God, we'll get that. Hopefully, it'll be the fourth Limerick win of the weekend, and we'll have plenty more games to look forward to in the following weekend. But there's no doubting that the showpiece event of the weekend is the All-Ireland final. But best of luck to all the Limerick teams, the minor footballers, minor hurlers.
Final overshadows everything, Jack, in fairness, and I suppose that's as it should be. But like you're right, we cannot forget the minors and the under-20s, because they are the breeding ground for the seniors of the future. And like they equally put in huge sacrifices to get to where they are.
Yeah, and please God, it'll be the perfect weekend for Limerick, capped off around 5 o'clock on Sunday evening. Hopefully people will be able to watch it with their families and experience the final in a different way, and hopefully Limerick will be back in finals in the years to come when we have plenty of crowds there. Many thanks to you, Matt, once again for joining me. We'll be back next week to go through the 4 games, hopefully 4 wins, as I've said so many times at this stage. And a huge thanks to Cavanaghs of Charleville for sponsoring all the GAA content on Sporting Limerick this weekend, or this week in general. We'll be back soon. Thanks again, Matt.
You're welcome, Jack.